Therefore, as the elect of God and his beloved, that's you and me. We don't see ourselves like that. That's you and me. Therefore, as the elect of God and his beloved, put on tender mercy and kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering. Listen to verse 13. Bear with one another. Forgive one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection, and let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which you're called to one body, and be thankful. I love that verse. And above all these things, here it is, put on love. I'm preaching today on put on the overcoat of love and then get over it. I love that verse, put on love. Clothe yourself in love, one translation says. Another translation says, forgive one another. Another translation says, make allowances for one another. Isn't that good? Make allowances. They're human. We're human. We're going to mess up. We're all going to fail. Make allowances. Don't be that person that nags. Make allowances for others' faults. Another translation said, put up with one another. That's a good way. Sometimes in families, we just putting up with one another. But no matter what kind of situation you get in, what he's saying is put the overcoat of love over it and love your way out, because it works. The most important piece of clothing that you can have is the overcoat of love. You say, but they've done me wrong. Put the overcoat of love over everything that has happened, and you'll find your way out. Because trouble is inevitable, but misery is optional. And you have to decide, because trouble's gonna come to every relationship and trouble's gonna come to every family. And I'm preaching on that much of the trouble, because that's really, in the big picture of things, the joy that family gives, the blessing that marriage is, all of that is so much bigger and so much greater. And what you have to decide is trouble is inevitable, but misery is optional, and hurt is a reality, but bitterness is a reaction. Put on the overcoat of love and get over it. Would you just tell the person beside you, put on the overcoat of love and get over it, or be miserable the rest of your life. You cannot allow the injustices of life. You cannot allow the hurts and the wounds of life to drag around you the rest of your life. Well, I just want to be like Jesus, Pastor. Well, Jesus had a Judas. Jesus had a Gethsemane. Jesus had a crucifixion. And you must understand what I'm about to teach you right here. The 100-fold return harvest that Jesus promised comes only with persecution. The Bible said some would receive 100-fold return. And it adds these little words, with persecution. Jesus was God's seed sown into the earth. He died and they threw him into the ground, but he rose from the dead and he came out 100-fold. He came out 100-fold from the dead, but it was with persecution. I've never met anybody who has 100-fold life that didn't have persecution. The bigger you build it, the more you do, expect it. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. You can't do anything worthwhile without having persecution. And when it comes, you don't quit. Jesus, when he hung on the cross, said, Father, forgive them. And he got over it. He put on the overcoat of love. And he said, I'm going to forgive them. Judas the betrayer came in the Garden of Gethsemane to turn him over to the torturers and a torturous death. And Jesus said something strange when he came to him. And Judas betrayed him with a kiss, and it was a secret code to the Roman soldiers pointing out, he's the one. The one that I kiss is the one that you need to arrest and crucify. And Jesus knew it. He knew it when he washed his feet in the upper room the night before that he would betray him. He knew it when he was in the garden praying, and he heard him and saw him coming, and Jesus stood. And when he came and kissed him on the cheek, Jesus, the Bible said, kissed him and said, friend. Jesus called him friend. Sometimes when things happen that hurt you, you just have to kiss it and call it friend. Because you have to understand, if it gets you closer to the ultimate fulfillment of the purpose of God for your life. Judas was the key to Jesus ending up on the cross. And he kissed it and called it friend. Sometimes painful, hurtful, ugly things come into our life. Just like Joseph, he said to his brothers who had hurt him, his own family so much, he said, I'm gonna put on the coat of love. You strip my coat off, that coat of many colors, but I choose to put the overcoat of love on. And you meant it for my evil, but I'm gonna kiss you and call you friend. And he kissed them and wept over them. Because when you get to that place that you understand, you can just kiss it and call it friend, because all things are working together for the good to them that are called according to his purpose. Why would I get bitter? Why would I hate somebody? Why would I let them destroy every relationship in my life by being a bitter, mean, angry person? It's not worth it. Jesus, when he hung on that cross, showed us that you can do it. You can kiss it and call it friend. When they ate the Passover meal in Egypt, the night before they came out, it was served with bread and lamb, the Passover lamb and bread. But there was a side dish with the Passover meal, and it was called bitter herbs. If you follow the lamb long enough, sooner or later, you're gonna get a side dish of bitter herbs. If you stay married long enough, it's sweet, it's wonderful, it's fantastic, there's no greater life, but sooner or later, you'll be offered a side dish of bitter herbs. Sooner or later in a family, the enemy tries to come in and says, I have a order, DoorDash right here. Take it, it's bitter herbs, and it's coming in your family. And at that moment, you have a decision to make. You can either let it chew on you, or you can take the bitter herbs and mix it with the sweet lamb and ingest it and take it and say, it's not gonna turn me bitter, it's gonna turn me better. And by God's grace, all things are working together for the good. So I trust him. It's ultimately gonna get me to my place of destiny and purpose, just like it did Jesus. Actually, it'll make you stronger. Actually, it'll make you greater. Have you ever been served the side dish of bitterness? When something happens in your family or in your life, and anger could get in your spirit, but you have to make a decision. And the remedy to it is to mix the bitter dish with the sweet Lamb of God. Ephesians 4 put it this way: be angry and sin not. It's okay to get angry, but he said, don't let that anger get in your spirit. Don't let that anger turn you into somebody that destroys every relationship because you couldn't get over what somebody did to you, and it bleeds over into every other relationship. He said, be angry and sin not, and then he tells you how to do it. He says, here's how you do that. Let not the sun go down on your wrath, lest you give place to the devil. That word place there is foothold in the Greek. That literally, when you get angry and you don't deal with it quickly, but you let it just get into your spirit, and anger becomes part of how you feel all the time. It's part of, oh, you can't stand that person. What happens is The Bible said it's dangerous because it gives place to the devil. And the word place is foothold, that literally you have just opened the door by not allowing that to come out of you, and the devil puts his foot in the door. And he says to every demon, go in and tear this house all to pieces, because they will not forgive one another. We have our foot in the door. Come on in and do your work. Would you like to shut the door in the devil's face? Would you like to give him no jurisdiction, no topography over your family, over your home, or over your life? What happens is when you get angry and stay angry, you open the door and the devil puts his foot in. But the moment that you decide, I don't appreciate it, I don't agree with it, it doesn't mean you're agreeing with what somebody did that was wrong. But what it means is I am not going to allow it to get in my spirit. Be angry and sin not. Let it go. Have you ever heard of a man by the name of Ahithophel? You probably haven't. Let me tell you about him. He was in King David's administration, and he was one of his chief counselors. And he was there for 25 years serving the great King David. But it's interesting that when Absalom, David's son, by hostile takeover, ran David off of the throne and out of town and scurrying for his life, the first person to defect from David's administration instantly to join Absalom's team and administration was this guy named Ahithophel. Why? Because he was the grandfather of Bathsheba. And you remember when David walked down on the balcony and saw Bathsheba and lusted after her and sent for her and had relationship with her and got her pregnant, and then to cover it up, killed her husband. All of that was watched by the grandfather in his inner circle. And that began to simmer inside of him in anger. And when Absalom launches his takeover coup, it was this man who was first to defect and join the team of Absalom. And he gave the advice, this is interesting, to David. You know what you ought to do, David? You ought to take his wives out on the porch and you ought to abuse them in front of the whole city as an act of shaming King David. That advice came from Bathsheba's grandfather, and that's exactly what Absalom did. Why? Because for 25 years, he had been seething with anger and offense and hurt. And now you hurt my family. You killed my son-in-law. You hurt my children on that side that grew up. I'm without their daddy. And you did that to my granddaughter. Do to his family what he did to my family. But interestingly, a few chapters later, this same man, Ahithophel, who could not get over it, who would not put on the coat of love, and I know it was heavy, and I know it was hard, because when you decide to simmer in hate and bitterness and unforgiveness and offense, you are committing spiritual suicide. And it may not happen in a day or a month, but there's no way that you can continue to let something just simmer in you. For 25 years, it burned in him. When the serpent bit the Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 19, he had a decision. It didn't just strike him, it chewed on him. It was chewing and releasing the poison. I know it was because the Bible said he had to shake it off of his arm just to get rid of it. And he shook it into the fire. The point is this: when somebody hurts you, have you ever had things chew on you 2 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and it's just chewing on you. I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they told that. I can't believe they lied. Like, I can't believe it's just chewing on you. And you have to make a decision. Are you going to let it poison you? Are you going to let it destroy every relationship? Or you can get over it. You can put on the overcoat of love and you can... Make allowances for one another and say, well, God, you gave me grace and forgiveness, so I'm going to give them grace and forgiveness, but I'm not going to live in the bitterness of that situation.